those who are displaced are those who survive. Most of them women, about 60%, and children. Because the men get killed or is forced to join these illegal armed groups. So it is a significant humanitarian crisis. Colombia had the second highest population of displaced people in the world after Sudan. Well, in 2000 we had the problem that the violence was very high. The country has some kind of fatigue of the Afro-Colombian concerns and movement and indigenous. So we said we need to go outside the country. So we start like trying to make connections with other groups that will sympathize with what we were trying to do in Colombia. The armed conflict, the third point that I wanted to make, we are in the crossfire of the armed conflict in Colombia and drug trafficking, and that really exacerbates the situation of racial discrimination and social exclusion. That's a huge problem, because what we see historically is when the entire country have openness and more democracy, Afro-Colombians benefit. When the entire country go back, Afro-Colombians suffer the most. Afro-Colombian indigenous communities suffer the most. So it's in our interest that the entire society move into more democracy, less armed conflict, less drug trafficking. Natural resources is one of the problems. Not the problem, one of the causes of displacement and the war. You see those numbers there in terms of the land and displacement. As you see the population in the center of, in purple you see the population Afro-Colombians, the first. And you see the land ownership that is in blue of Afro-Colombians. And then the number of displaced people. So you see the disproportion is huge in terms of how many people you have displaced, the land that you have, and the population. The same thing for indigenous communities. The land that they have, the population and displacement. And then the rest of the population. But the rest of the population, really the displacement is concentrated in rural communities. So this is not so, I can say this population will be less if you exclude urban areas. So Afro-Colombian, indigenous, and rural communities in Colombia are tremendously impacted by displacement. Is the land that really at this moment has tremendous natural resources, and everybody's looking at those lands for economic interest. Well, this is the map of some areas of environmental wealth. So we are there. Diversity and natural resources, you see fantastic nature in Afro-Colombian indigenous regions, beautiful people. Some numbers about biodiversity. Colombia is very high in those Afro-Colombian territories. So there are some plants that only are in those areas. Pharmaceutical companies are very interested in those areas. In terms of the looking into the future, one of the challenges is that there are tremendous differences between the vision and conception and proposal for development of Afro-Colombian communities and indigenous communities and the rest of the country, particularly what the government is proposing in those areas and what corporations and companies, the private sector, is proposing in those areas. So there is a lot of infrastructural projects that they are proposing without consultation. Agribusiness project. You may have heard about palm oil and how these companies took land from Afro-Colombians without their consent, and a lot of killings out there. And also Colombia, the vision that the government and the Colombian elite is articulating that Colombia will be a mining country. With the mining sector will be the lead sector of the economy. And they are thinking about developing this mining sector, extracting resources that are mainly in Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities. And that is a huge challenge that we will confront and are confronting at this point. For example, if you see the Pacific coast, this is the land that is owned by Afro-Colombians. So anything that you are going to do in the Pacific coast, if you try to get into the Asian markets, if you wanted to build ports, if you wanted to extract resources, you have to consult this community because they own the land collectively. We already seen that environmental degradation. Colombia already have approved some mining titles to. There is one company called Anglo Gold Ashanti, it's a South African company. So they approved this title without consulting with communities. Also, they approved the title for a U.S. company called Murillo Mining Corporation in black community territories. And black communities challenged that Colorado company, and they won a lawsuit at the Colombian Constitutional Court. So now they are in discussions, and so you see that this is already happening. So we have some challenges that we need to confront: the violation of human rights in those territories, displacement, there are conflict. So those are challenges that we need to confront. In terms of the U.S. foreign policy, we see mixed results. Since 2000, based on the work that Afro-Colombians and some allies in the United States did, the U.S. policy, U.S. government, starting with the Republican government of George Bush, they starting to put the Afro-Colombian issue on the table in discussion with the Colombian government. Even when President Bush went to Colombia in 2005, if I recall correctly, 2006, the only group outside the government, the executive branch, that he met was the Afro-Colombian Leaders Group, the only one. And President Obama have continued with this policy, but and there is a lot of results. But we can talk about that later. But there's a lot of policy work. The State Department, the Western Hemisphere Bureau, already created the unit to deal with racial and ethnic equality and social inclusion. They are already assigning funding for leadership development for Afro-Colombian indigenous communities. So there is some progress there. One member of Congress here in Massachusetts, James McGovern, have been very active in doing this. Well, Phelps Stokes, what we're doing in terms of collaborating with Afro-Colombian communities, Dr. Foster will talk about that later. We have, given that I knew that I'm coming to the Wheelock College, I took my conceptual framework for academics. I'm not academic, so I know the university like this conceptual framework. So this but I will not talk about it. And we have hope for the future, and Dr. Foster can talk about that. He have been there. He have talked to these emerging leaders, students of Afro-Colombian community. He felt the energy. He can talk about that. Really, we have hope that will change. This is Dr. Foster talking to students in Quibdó, in the Pacific Coast, in the middle of students. This is one student that came to DC and now is doing a service learning project in rural communities. This is the dean of the Howard Law School being challenged by one Afro-Colombian leader that is also a lawyer and very passionate about things, so he was challenged there. And we are doing some projects in Colombia. With Fulbright Commission, we have working on bringing Afro-Colombian students here. And we have a small part of leadership development there. We evaluated USAID programs to see their impact on Afro-Colombians. A lot of work that we have been doing since in the last 5-6 years. and you can help. That's what I wanted to say is like being informed about Afro descendants in Latin America and Afro-Colombia is very important, and raising awareness. You can help us here in Boston, for example. Also, taking action as the Wheelock College is doing, and bringing people to talk about that, and also financial support for our projects. It's like we have very specific projects with very specific students and leaders that sometimes need financial support. So that was my presentation. Took very long, but thank you very much.